behind the scenes here with another episode of Run With It with George Deglin. This is the unfiltered, unedited version of Run With It. If you'd like to get the polished version, post-production, and with all the fancy bells and whistles that come with that, subscribe to us on your podcast player of choice. Search for Run With It. You should be able to find us there. We'd also appreciate a review if you enjoy the show. Otherwise,
unedited. This is where we get down and dirty.
Yeah, I can tell that's the mood you're in, Ethan. I don't know if you're going to be able to drag George down into that. He seems like he's. I don't know if he's ready for all that.
The depths of the human psyche, really.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
where we go.
Well, it's going to be fun pulling that out of a SaaS business idea, the idea of serving SaaS companies.
Exactly.
All right. Well, let's get into it.
Okay.
So now I feel like it's kind of weird to just say, hey, how's it going, Ethan?
Hey, Chris, how's it going? How are you doing today? What do you think about today's idea that we're going to discuss?
I think that this feels super contrived and we should just redo that part, honestly. All right, let's start.
No. You're supposed to say, I think that this feels super contrived.
That's all good. This is the Facebook experience. This is why it's unedited. We're trying different things here. All right. Ethan, how's it going?
You only think it's not contrived if you start the conversation. That's all. You're just used to being
this is the kind of tension that people come to Run With It for. So I appreciate that. We've got George Deglin sitting here patiently waiting. I have no idea how he's tolerating what we're talking about here, but he is the One Signal founder. That is a tool to help businesses interact with their customers more effectively via push notifications across web, mobile devices, etc. We'll talk more about that at the end of the episode. Doing over 10 million a year in revenue. I think I saw 9.9. I'm going to round up, assuming that
enough about that, Chris. We don't need to hear about his current project. We want to talk about the new business idea.
Let's hear it.
Yeah. So the new business idea has something to do with making an ecosystem sort of a la Shopify, but for SaaS creators, so that they can just kind of hit the ground running, just like somebody can hit the ground running with an e-commerce business with Shopify. And we looked around. I looked around. I think Chris looked around. I mean, we didn't find too much that's like this. It seems like an interesting idea. Why did you think of this? Like, was there something that sparked this thought?
Yeah. Personal experience, frankly. Obviously, One Signal is a SaaS company. And when we started the company, we had aspirations for all of these things that we wanted to build to help our customers. What we didn't anticipate was that so much of our time would go into not actually building all of this messaging infrastructure, but it was frankly building all this boilerplate to do billing and many other things that go into running a SaaS business. We looked, same thing. We looked years ago for a product to help simplify some of this. And like every company, we ended up cobbling things together, but would have been great to have something that just provided it all in one box.
What percentage of your developer time was spent doing things that you think could have been boilerplate versus the things that made One Signal unique?
Yeah, it varies. I think it comes kind of in waves as the business evolves and as we want to have more foundation in certain places. Early on, it was probably something like 30-40%. And now on an ongoing basis, it's probably about 20% of our time to maybe even 30% at times.
That's huge.
Yeah, it's huge. Like the number of engineers that are just working on boilerplate that frankly could oftentimes be solved with, a product like this one.
Why don't you give those engineers a little bit more resources and do this, right? That's why not put that out there in the world?
Well, I think there's an importance of focus with the company. We have thousands of customers using our existing product, asking us for features. It's what we're good at. I think if I was to go start another business, I could easily see it being something like this one.
So I found an article, it's actually from a couple of years ago, but it's called the 15 Predictions for the Next Big Thing in Software Development, coming out of Forbes. And some interesting ideas. Definitely, number 5 is software to build software. That makes a lot of sense. And I think that, this is a recurring theme in any situation where there's some sort of money to be made or some sort of growing industry, is to be meta about it, right? Like if it's the gold rush, you sell the pickaxes and the shovels, and that's where you make the money. So it definitely seems like not only something that solves a lot of headaches, but something that's going to be just a smart business idea. Like we see with Shopify, looking at the stock since 2017, it grew from like $40 a share to, what is it now? Like 1,100 or something
it's about
like
1,100, I think. Yeah, something
yeah,
like that.
I mean, it's ridiculous, the growth of a company like that. And again, that's kind of what they're doing, selling shovels to the gold miners, right?
Yeah, I was listening to an episode of Masters of Scale with Reid Hoffman and Toby Luca, the founder of Shopify, and it's all about platforms and how valuable platforms can be. I think Reid Hoffman distilled the most valuable thing you can do in business is he compressed it, to use his words, is be a platform. So that there's a ton of power in that. I think that it's inaccessible, or it's harder to envision for new entrepreneurs. So I guess I'd like to hear more about how you would go about doing this, and maybe we can start with the aspects that need to be built. You had shared here user account management, usage-based billing, free trials, integrations with billing systems, integrations with support tools, integrations with sales and marketing software. I guess taking one example of, let's say, integrations with billing systems, how much do you really save having something like that versus just the PayPal or Stripe setup that exists?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and it's something that I definitely thought about when I was coming up with this idea. Um, the reality is you probably don't want to try to replace a lot of these best of breed tools like Stripe, for example. And in fact, Stripe does a lot of things that play an important part in this idea. Probably where things start to fall short is when you're bringing multiple tools into your company. So you may want Stripe, but you also want that to work well with Salesforce, or you want that to work well with your user account system, so you can uh, grant user access to things that they pay for versus didn't pay for. Those are probably where the bulk of the work for this idea comes in. And then wherever possible, you don't try to replace, but rather you partner with products like Stripe or Intercom or Salesforce to make them all work very well together.
Let's talk a little bit about not necessarily competitors, but analogs. Like we talked about Stripe. Something that I'm using right now is Kartra, which I hadn't even heard of a few years ago. And it's a new software, so you could find glitches and it's not perfect, but I feel like that's what they're doing for the type of niche that I have a business in, which is under education, a marketing information products. And so, it's got an email, it's a way I can send email. And it's got a way that I could send text messages. It's got a way that I can create sales pages. It's got a way that I can host my content. And all within that, I can track what's going on. I can go look at a lead and I can say, they opened this email, they went to this sale page, they used this coupon. And it's really nice because I don't have to focus on setting those things up. And these type of businesses are growing really rapidly. ClickFunnels was another example of something that tried to create a platform like that. I actually switched from ClickFunnels to Kartra. Happy that I did. I'm not trying to knock ClickFunnels right now. It sounds like yeah, but anyways, I think this is the way that they have sold these things is really interesting too. Shopify, the way that it's grown recently is just by word of mouth. So there was I think it's tens of thousands of their new clients just coming this year are through referrals from existing satisfied customers. So it's also an interesting way we can think about growing a business like this. You do a good job, you make it easy, and you grow it based on some sort of a referral system where everybody benefits from the growth.
Yeah, exactly. And I think one of the things that's probably been driving a lot of Shopify adoption is merchants are buying products for themselves or for their business, and they see that their competitor or someone else, another place where they're buying products, is using Shopify. They realize that the experience is far better than perhaps what they're doing without Shopify, and convert over. And I think the same exact thing could happen. I mean, what's one of the values of platforms like this is people will experience them and then move over to the platform because they want to have that same experience for their service.
Well, really, that's talking about the product itself being so good that people remark upon it, right? We talk about that a lot for even growing the podcast, is how do we make this remarkable? And Shopify came up with a solution that was incredibly valued, such that people want to talk about it and share with friends. That's not the only way that people are doing it. I just read an article from the New York Times talking about Shopify. The title is, "Can Shopify compete with Amazon without becoming Amazon?" And the subtitle says, "Shopify, the key has been to put the merchant first." But the closing line of that article, it was, the closing thought was basically that this person's business, the author's business, the attempt that they made would not exist if it weren't for Shopify. And I think that's a really interesting aspect of a platform like this, right? And I'm curious how many additional SaaS companies could exist if you took off that 30% of overhead work. That maybe that's the point between you being profitable and not, and extending your runway. I mean, the slow ramp of death of SaaS companies that can change the trajectory for a significant number of companies.
Yeah, absolutely. I think just as you see so many people moving, like creating these e-commerce experiences because it's so easy to do with Shopify, you could easily see many more SaaS companies emerge. And these don't need to be like huge multi-billion-dollar businesses. It could be like a weekend project where someone puts together a useful service and launches it on this platform because it can be reduced to just a few hours of work, and creates a business that otherwise would have never existed.
Yeah, I think that would be a really interesting use case. One of the things that come to mind about the psychology of the folks who could implement an idea like this is you keep hearing that developers undervalue what they develop. And on the surface level, you hear about the solution to essentially do something that developers
also
can already
overvalue what they develop. I
Maybe
think
some
no
of them,
sense
sure.
of the value of what they develop.
Just all over the place. Yeah. But I guess, yeah, it makes me think that I wonder how many people passed up on this idea because they think that it's just, it's not valuable.
Yeah.
Do you think more people, as someone who's a developer and a business owner, do you think more people would pass up on this idea because it sounds boring, or because they don't believe that it's profitable?
Well, I think there's a few things. There's a few things that make it difficult.
Boring
one
or
is
hard,
that,
I guess.
Yeah, it is hard for sure. There's also a long ramp before you will probably start making money on this idea, because it's very hard to sell it to companies that have already established all of these systems, and probably aren't eager to like move off of it to some like brand new company. So you really need to take the long path. You have to start by serving emerging businesses, which by their nature won't be able to pay a lot. But those are going to be the ones that are okay adopting this early on, and then hopefully they'll grow with it. And I think that you see this sort of same model with products like Stripe, where they started just with startups, grew with them, and then that has fueled like the tremendous growth they've had since.
Why would that be the case if you're still spending 20 to 30% of developer time on maintaining these independently developed, hacked together solutions?
Well, it's because replacing something that you've, like all of the systems that a company has built with something completely different, in and of itself is very difficult.
Right.
I think for a product like this, it's something where you want to use it from the very beginning, like from the very start when you implement how you manage user accounts, or from the very beginning of how you implement payments into your product. If you're doing it on this tool, then you're going to be in a perfect position to scale.
Or it'd have to be so good such that you're compelled to switch, and it's worth the switching.
Which over time that could happen. But I think if you're building this idea from the ground floor, it's going to take you a while before you get to that point. And so startups are going to be your early audience for sure.
Makes sense. Trying to think of analogs to this in terms of, oftentimes the bane or sort of the downfall of a startup company, and this is why you haven't started this idea, right, is you need to focus, right? And if you lose focus, you try to do this, you try to do this, you try to do too many things, be too many things for too many people, you lose. Right. And I think that that's part of why this idea sounds scary. Oh, we're going to integrate everything. So what are some models then, when I think like, what are some models that you could look at to see successful businesses, right? I already mentioned Kartra, right? They're not trying to be, they're trying to be one thing for one person, one type of client, but it's all about the integration. Or like Zapier, another great example where they're not trying to be everything for everybody, but they're trying to be the integrator. And I think that you can get over that hurdle of not being able to focus by focusing on, it's really about connections and integrations, and not trying to do all those things, but trying to connect the modules together for people. Would you agree?
Yeah, exactly. I have a feeling that if you were to start on this idea, you would probably either just pick one main area to focus on initially, or it would sort of naturally come to you through customer demand. And that could be tied to how payments are handled. It could be tied to how user accounts and authorization is managed. But that would probably be kind of the core place to start. But then the great thing is if you come at it with the mission to build a sort of platform and you start layering things on top, then that's where it goes from just being a nice tool to being a really powerful and valuable platform.
I want to call back a previous Run With It episode. It was episode 45. Connecting independent software vendors and CRMs with Steve Benson. He shared exactly this thought, and he did focus it on CRMs and smaller software vendors. Talked about compiling a list of independent software vendors from the Salesforce App Exchange and contacting them to basically validate this idea as, hey, would you pay for a connector that would allow you to connect with other CRM platforms, the universal connector. So is that what you're talking about here in niching down to one specific segment?
Yeah, no, I mean, not specifically that use case, but right. You wouldn't necessarily say we're going to build like all of this payment stuff and like CRM support and authentication support all at once. I think that would be quite a lot to take on. You probably pick one and focus on it as sort of the starting point. When I look back at what are the really foundational pieces that a SaaS company needs when they're starting to build their business and look for products like this, it probably ties to how they manage user accounts is probably quite important. I think how they manage some of their marketing systems can be quite important, and maybe linking those two would be kind of the starting point. But that might vary as you sort of validate it with customers.
Then that brings to mind the idea of buying a company that is already working on one of these tools, and it could be a WordPress plugin. I imagine that a lot of the SaaS companies are moving away from WordPress to React or something else like that. But buying something like that and getting that user base and then expanding from there.
Yeah, maybe. It might be possible to start out with something that already has a user base, already fills like an important need, and then layering additional capabilities on top of it. For sure.
So in the research for this business came up, in terms of like competitors or who's already doing this or getting into this company Limio came up. Are you guys aware of this company at all, or?
So I took a look at that when coming up with this idea. My impression of Limio is that they haven't really launched. It's kind of in beta. So perhaps they're on the right track here. But given that it's been a long time, we don't really see any publicly visible products from them yet. It's not clear that they're a threat or not.
I see an article here on Limio that they raised, I don't know, I think it was something like 300,000 pounds or something like that, or like something equivalent of like $450,000. I'm not big in startups and fundings. I don't know the numbers. That doesn't sound like a lot. Do we feel like that's a lot, or does anybody have a sense for that?
That's definitely on the smaller side, but it's not unusual for a company at their stage. It sounds like it's sort of pre having a widely accessible product. It's probably pre-revenue. There also, it sounds like probably an international business where it might be a little bit harder to fundraise. I wouldn't count that against them all that much. I think the fact that they've raised money and it seems like a good idea is promising. If anything, I think it validates that there's probably an opportunity here. There may be multiple companies that are going to chase it over time, but so far there has yet to be a winner.
Yeah,
they
on
call
the website,
themselves the Shopify for subscriptions as well. So people are really tuning into that way of distilling the opportunity.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things that I noticed when researching this is, in fact, there are people that are using Shopify for this exact use case. And Shopify is not designed to be the system for your SaaS product. The fact that people are using it that way, despite its the design being for something else entirely, suggests that there probably really is an opportunity here.
Yeah, totally. And that's also a great action step if you can figure out how to intercept these folks who are using that, right? I mean, maybe there's even, I don't know, maybe even you start a group that's like hacking Shopify to run your SaaS business, right? And you kind of, there's probably a handful of people like, oh yeah, I'd like to get in that group because I want to know what are all the hacks. But then on top of that, you'll find out what are the common places where it's not working, right? And then that's how you can start to think, what are the first things that we can put together that can help people? And who knows, maybe there's a way, maybe there's a way to hack Shopify to make it like the white label backend of, whatever you're going to create for SaaS owners, and then slowly build it into your own product.
Yeah, that's a great idea. In fact, one thing I didn't look at, but it's probably worth exploring, is Shopify has this very robust app ecosystem. There may be apps that are out there that provide some of this, and that could be maybe acquiring one of those apps or partnering with it. It could be a way to get some of that initial customer interest or revenue, and then perhaps leverage parts of the Shopify platform, perhaps bring other external products into the ecosystem. And then decide long term whether it makes sense to keep that Shopify component around or not.
I want to talk about customer acquisition here, and we're talking about Stripe a couple times. You mentioned Stripe as being a company to look to as inspiration for how they got customers. They have the famous Collison installation. If you read about them on Y Combinator, where Patrick Collison would sit down with founders and actually have them open up their laptop and set up Stripe with them. The difference that I'm seeing here is that we're targeting aspiring or very early SaaS entrepreneurs, not folks who are already taking payments, who have an established business. So I think one of the risks there would be that a lot of these aspiring SaaS founders or very early ones fail and either because their idea wasn't that great, or they just haven't gone through it. Whereas if someone is already taking money and you can see their revenue, then it's probably worth Patrick Collison's time to set up Stripe for them.
Well, I think actually a lot of the businesses that Patrick Collison was helping were actually like just getting off the ground and had a very high degree of uncertainty. But that was okay. He may have helped hundreds of companies. If just a couple percent of those became hugely successful, then that was obviously a great starting point. But the other thing to keep in mind is when you help someone set it up for their business, just because the business doesn't succeed doesn't mean that that's not an opportunity, because those people are going to go, they're going to start another company, they're going to join another startup. And if you turn them into an evangelist, like that customer lead is going to stay for years or decades to come.
I really like the idea of partnering with VC firms, because you can take the same approach with this business that a VC firm does, is that you can serve people who are starting out, that they're not going to succeed, but a couple ones are really going to hit pay dirt, and you're going to grow with them. And it's I think it's going to have that effect, just like being a VC does, where by serving one individual or a handful of individuals, whether or not they make it, there's always going to be people trying to make it. And so you keep serving, you kind of foster the garden, right? And it's not like every plant's going to grow, but you're more helping people till the soil and get started there. Sorry, I'm getting way metaphorical.
It's totally true. And a lot of companies take this exact route, and they'll give away like generous versions of their products completely for free to startups. You see this even like AWS will give startups a lot of like free credits on their platform. And yeah, 9 times out of 10, like, they don't really get that money back. But enough times, like a business that's using those credits or using these products will grow and actually become like some of the largest customers that they may have.
Looking at the value of the solution here, you shared some numbers. Given the immense savings in development and maintenance costs, it's foreseeable that early stage businesses could pay 3% or more of their revenue for this solution. And then additional revenue could be captured by implementing a payment system. For each customer at 10 million annual recurring revenue, this would be a $300K opportunity. Those numbers align very serendipitously with your income here. So presumably that's something that's on the order of magnitude for what you would pay for a solution like this if you were starting from scratch.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the development savings alone is monumental. Like, if I could just click a button, like, I look back at like all these things that our team has had to do. Like we recently implemented Marketo, and it was such an arduous process because we've got data that lives in our database in a certain way, and we've got these other tools that we've chosen to implement in certain ways, and then we want to get data into Marketo, and it's hard because we've built this bespoke system. This is true of every single business. They've got their customer data living in some format. They've got various tools they use. If their product like this existed, and if we had sort of followed the design principles that it had, and those were standardized, and we could just click a button and Marketo would be turned on and data flowing in a logical way, like, I mean, the business frankly would be further along. It would have saved weeks of time that we could spend in other places.
I looked on Hacker News, and I think you brought this up. It's been tossed around a little bit. There's an open source SaaS boilerplate that the creators of Builder Book and another app have put out there for people to work with. Did you look into that any more deeply? Like, does it have the features that we're talking about, like payments and some of those basics, or is it more just kind of like the back end programming of the web interface or something?
I haven't had a chance to look deeply. I did happen to see that there were several open source projects with a lot of followers, which I think serves as further validation of the opportunity here. My experience, and I don't know if this is true with these projects, but a lot of times you'll see open source projects like this get started, and they can be quite good, but it's never as good as a company that has a commercial interest in making like an excellent product, and is able to put the time and resources into that. So if anything, like these open source projects like might be a great sort of example or starting point. And a lot of people that maybe use one of these open source projects today, I could see them easily moving over to something comparable but better.
Yeah, and if anybody wants to find that, I think if you just search boilerplate app for SaaS product, especially on Hacker News, you'll come across this. It's funny how these things on GitHub don't really have a name sometimes. It's just Async is the name of one of the businesses that they started. Builder Book is the name of the other, and it just kind of says Async SaaS boilerplate or something. But yeah, it could be really powerful to just dig in a little bit and see what they started with.
I'm interested in jumping over to some of the benefits of a solution like this. So they're the direct benefits where you're saving some developer time. You also mentioned that the scale of the platform can help build competitive advantages like platform-wide fraud prevention tools, pre-saved payment information. What else is an opportunity out there that we can think of?
Yeah, well, I think one thing where a lot of businesses run into difficulties is they might go to implement a solution, like maybe they go implement like a new email marketing product, or maybe they go to implement a new payment system. They don't always succeed. Like sometimes you may find that for whatever reason, it just takes too long or it's too complicated. There's not really a clearly set path on how to evolve your SaaS business and the various tools and integrations you need to set up. So a tool like this can, and standardizing a lot of these practices can actually increase the chance of success of a lot of the work that a company does, and also increase the quality, right? If in order to send effective messages via your marketing tool, you need to have your customer data in it, and you can sort of like click a button and get that to happen very seamlessly, then that means your marketing is going to be more effective. That means your business is going to be more successful.
I was thinking along the lines of, if more SaaS companies are present on this platform, the value of the platform as a whole gets more more valuable. Are there any aspects like that happen?
Yeah.
And you mentioned that, you know, the fraud prevention tools. Anything else?
Yeah. So I think there's a lot of things around payments in particular where you can start to use either analytics that you develop or even like customer information to help each company on the platform be more successful. So for example, and I think Stripe might do this, but saving people's payment information when they check out on one website so that it's pre-filled on the next one. I think that's tremendously valuable. Really streamlines the checkout process. There may be other opportunities. I think one of the things that Shopify does is they'll show you benchmarks on how your website or how your store compares to others. That could be in the performance, like do your pages load quickly, or it could also be around like user engagement and things like that. And you can bring those same insights to everyone across this platform, so people can benchmark themselves. They can say like, you know, how does my churn compare to other companies in my category, or how does user retention or average customer value compare? That could be quite valuable.
I just want to throw out my paranoid fantasies here that I often worry about and maybe even see happening. So we have all these levels now of abstraction with technology to the point where, like, we have people who don't believe the earth is round anymore, even though, or spherical, let's put it that way, you know, just because you don't have to know that, you know, it's just like, and so I'm just like, I guess what I'm concerned about is this is going to be great for maybe developing software work quickly. Are we getting ourselves stupider here somehow? Like, are we digging ourselves into a unescapable ditch of despair?
I mean, we're getting generally stupider, but I'd say specifically smarter, right? Like people.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Generally stupider, but generally specifically smarter.
Yeah, exactly. So I can't tell you how an airplane works, or how to build a deck, or, you know, even how to build a table. I've never built a table, whereas if you go back 300 years, everyone would do that. So I think that's a common critique of any advancement in society.
Yeah, well, I think it's about specialization. When you're building a SaaS product to provide a service, you really want to spend as much of your time on exactly what you're providing, like what makes you different. And all the boilerplate stuff behind the scenes that everyone just keeps building like over and over, that's not a differentiator. That's just something that like is a cost. And so if you can like,
and you could argue that is actually not as valuable to society as a whole if everyone's just recreating that, right? If you can save all that time and have those developers focus on building new SaaS features or new SaaS apps, then that is overall better.
I don't know whether I could say this if I didn't just sort of ignore what you just said, but I'm going to play bad cop here right now and just say like, but isn't that what starting a meaningful company is all about, is doing the hard stuff? Isn't that where all the people who fail actually get lost, is thinking it should be so easy that all I have to do is the stuff that I care about, really. And then they get in there and they say, oh, I got to set up, you know, Marketo integration. Oh, screw this. Like, I don't even want to do it anymore. Like, do you agree with me at all that there's any legs to that side of things?
It's a philosophical question.
Are we encouraging people to just like not want to do anything difficult? You know, I don't know.
Well, it's not. It's not necessarily difficult. I think it's more of the companies that succeed like have to figure this stuff out anyway, but it just slows them down. It just slows down innovation. It takes valuable engineering time that's just duplicated from
the
one company to the next.
The argument there is that there are hard problems to work on, but they're not these. And so let's get these problems taken care of. Like you said, Chris, they've already been done before. And so just get them done. You're not proving anything by reinventing the wheel.
Yeah. How far back do you go? You're going to make the teams build the building that they're working out of and, lay the fiber optic cable to get their internet and grow the wheat that they use in their sandwiches. Like that's
there's another element here, which is it is actually kind of hard. And a lot of companies that build these systems, they don't do it in the best way. I've been shocked at how many companies can't do billing in like a logical way. Like when every week I'm logging into all these different products. I'm trying to figure out like, how am I getting charged for this? How do I get my receipts? It's just a mess. Like everyone does it completely differently. Some of them are frankly broken. And it's because like they're trying to minimize how much time they put into it, and it's not their area of expertise. And both the business and their users are going to have far better experiences if they can outsource this to experts and then focus on what they actually want to be experts at, which is providing their great SaaS product.
We got to talk about.
Let me. No. I'm just taking us off the rails here for a second here. I just want to throw in something that nobody cares about. You can cut this, but there is an artist. His name is Thomas Thwaites, and he did this thing called the Toaster Project, where he actually attempted to build a toaster from scratch. Like, just like raw materials, like melting metal down and, creating the wires and whatever, like all the details. It looks horrible, but if you want to check out an exercise in what you
man, I empathize with that completely. One of my dreams in life is to make a meal completely from scratch, where I do like grow the wheat, raise
you gotta meet my buddy
Sam.
You got to meet my buddy Sam. If you go in Sam's backyard, it's just literally a garden full of food, and he's, you got to meet him.
I know that's a much more romantic notion than I'm sure that it actually would be in practice. I don't think that my family would appreciate me spending a year of my life to make a sandwich. But all right, let's get into action steps here. We're 38 minutes in. What are some
I'm
of the
sorry,
things...
I got to cut right in real quick. I just think that's a great title for a book if anybody wants to write it.
What's
a year of my life to make a sandwich.
All right, that could be the title of this episode. I'll have nothing to do with that. Action steps here. So some of the things you mentioned, that this would be a long play. You need to get startups on board. We talked about trying to find some of those early SaaS companies. I think one of the good ideas I'm going to bring back was to look at the Shopify App Store and see if there are any apps present there that people are trying to finagle Shopify to work for their SaaS system. There are tools like Built With that you can use to look at data for companies that are using Shopify, and maybe you can overlay that with some SaaS related other tools to try and find them. So, what do you guys think about other steps to take?
Yeah, just to reiterate, partnering up with VC firms, that maybe have some significant. Number one, you got that startup. They're going to support you like you're a startup. They're going to understand what it's like for you to be a startup. And number two, they're going to feed you, their latest businesses, because like we said earlier, they want them to focus on what is their actual value proposition, not just getting started. And all those, not all of them, but a lot of those VC firms is about getting started quickly. Right. And they're just going to they're going to eat this up. How fast can we throw this thing together and get
actually, I think that's brilliant, because they would probably pay for that too. A VC firm, if they had you on retainer, and let's say that you're just going to, whatever, they pay you $100,000, $500,000 a year to help all of their entire portfolio is more likely to be successful if they are paying you.
It could start too. It could start too as almost like a consulting outsourcing service, where you just you build a team of programmers and you go to VC firms and you say, we're your SaaS startup toolkit. You just tell us what you need to integrate with, and we'll pop it all together. And in the process, your consulting firm is going to develop basically a proprietary system for getting these started. And then you start to actually systematize that system that you built.
Yeah, and in fact, if not partnering with a VC firm, you could actually just partner with a few early stage businesses and do this as consulting work for them, with the agreement that whatever you build, you can then productize separately. That could be a great way to bring in early revenue, as well as, of course, validate that you're building the right thing.
Another interesting approach to take, you know, I haven't done this yet myself, but I've heard it as just like a really interesting strategy to take, for, you know, is to have equity stake, you know. And so you could start with some of these businesses, say, yeah, you're going to have to pay us a modest retainer fee, but we'll take a slight bit of equity in your business. Then you're motivated to work hard to get these startups going. And I mean, and you're almost creating your own little VC firm out of it too, right? By helping all of these, you know, potentially very exciting startups get off the ground.
Yeah. The other distribution opportunity is actually working with companies that you plan to integrate with. So if you plan to provide intercom as a way to integrate for customer support, then they could also be a great distribution channel, either through a BD relationship or just presence in their partner ecosystem. It could drive attention.
Thinking about the sales of a platform like this, I have this caricature of software developers being really bullheaded and saying, no, I don't want to take your code. I want to build it myself. I want to go through and build the payments processing the way that I like it to be. Do you guys think that would be a challenge in selling boilerplate software like this?
So speaking as a former engineer, this is the last thing that I would want to work on. And in fact, it's hard to get engineers to work on this stuff because it is boilerplate. It is stuff that's behind the scenes. Engineers aspire to work on stuff that's like customer facing or really technically interesting. And this boilerplate stuff like is rarely the area of interest.
Well, I mean, that's great to hear. I guess why doesn't someone go out and do this other than it takes a long time? It seems like a fantastic idea. You've laid it out there. It's pretty approachable if you're a developer, at least from the consulting angle and working with some early stage businesses. It's shocking to me that this doesn't exist.
So I think that there's a timing element to it. There is certainly a trend of many, many more SaaS businesses being created today. I think if you go back even a few years, it was a different landscape. Like SaaS wasn't as big. There weren't as many startups that were looking for things like this. Another component is certainly that it's hard. There's a lot of stuff to build. There's not like an immediate like big enterprise company that's going to write you a huge check to build it. You have to, start small. You have to sell to startups initially. You have to either like raise venture capital to fund the development of this, or you have to run the company in a really, really lean way. And all these things are more challenging, require a great deal of expertise. And I think that's probably what's held people back.
Seems like a really great project for something like YC. Like if you got into YC with a project like this, you're magically surrounded by all these other people starting SaaS companies, and then they're all your first customers, and they support you and they're rooting for you, and everybody around you is going to be rooting for you to win, basically.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think Stripe certainly took advantage of the YC community early on. I think getting into an incubator like Y Combinator is probably like really, really a good idea for this project.
I think that's a good place to wrap here. To the listener out there, take some action. Let us know, at the very least.
Let us know the listener in there.
It's the listener in there, in your earphones.
You are in their head, Chris.
I just picture them in outer space. Ethan always gives me a hard time, George, for saying the listener out there. I hope that we get fan mail from the listener saying that I am out there.
That I live in. Yeah. Have been living in for the past hour.
Weeks and weeks of you correcting me here. Let us know what you think about the feedback. If you agree with what Ethan is saying and you just hate when I say the listener out there, please tell me and I will, I don't know, put a quarter in the swear jar or something like that.
10 push-ups.
10 push-ups. That's fun too. But yeah, take some action on this idea. Let us know what you think at the very least. George, really appreciated the conversation. It's been a lot of fun. Where can people go to learn more about you and what you're up to?
Yeah, so I'm the co-founder and CEO of a company called OneSignal. You can visit our website at onesignal.com. And OneSignal is the best platform for businesses to intelligently engage with customers across every channel. We provide a simple interface to push notifications, email, in-app messaging, and most recently, SMS. So just like the idea we talked about, we help businesses focus on quality user engagement instead of having to do all these complex integrations.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, because I think, yeah, traditionally people, when they're communicating, you've got to pick a channel and maybe you get good at it and you can't integrate with everything. Yeah. Excellent.
Cool. Thank you so much, guys. This was fun.
Yeah. Thank you. It's been a pleasure and looking forward to chatting with you soon.
All right. Shirley, I'll sign us off the interweb here.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right.
See ya, Facebook. I'm going to hit stop recording on